my biggest fear is that the more we rely on communication to support remote working, the more we'll lose sight of the fact that, again, I keep coming back to it, that we are social beings that need that face-to-face interaction. Like, humans crave it, the human brain craves it, when that's never going to change.
That was Ryan Tahmassebi from Hive HR, and this is Remote Control.
Thanks for joining us today. With me is Ryan, the Director of People Science at Hive. It's an employee feedback platform and a strategic partner to, well, some of the most well-known companies in the UK. Yeah, thanks for joining me, Ryan.
No problem, Jack. Thanks for having me.
I was just taking a look at some of the kind of companies that you've kind of worked alongside in the past. There's some like huge names there: Amazon, the NHS, Nestle. Must be some kind of, well, I imagine some very differences in employee experience and engagement between, say, like Amazon and the NHS. Is that something that you would say is true?
It's definitely some differences, but there's probably more similarities as well.
Really?
That you wouldn't perhaps wouldn't spring to mind straight away. I mean, I guess one of the biggest differences is kind of walking into that almost a city within a city. The Amazon campus in Seattle is very, very different experience to walking into an NHS trust or walking through the wards of an NHS hospital. But seeing the high rises and the different kind of nightclubs and the coffee shops and the restaurants and gyms that all surround such a huge site where they're based out there, you can kind of see that almost, it's not necessarily an employee experience working there, but it's like a life experience, because you're almost kind of encapsulated within one area which has everything you need, rather than it necessarily just being a traditional place of work. And I guess that's where the word campus comes from with these kind of places like Amazon and Google, in that you can literally spend all of your time there,
the whole life,
not just the traditional 9 to 5. So I guess this idea of a shift is one of the big differences there, and what that looks like, and obviously the physical environment, the space, and how modern the workspace is there. I guess some of the similarities which struck me quite quickly is, when you have those conversations with people about, how would you kind of capture what it feels like to work here, or how would you describe the culture here? They're very quickly talking about, I think the phrase the first person used was kind of hamster on the wheel. There's always more work to do, it's just always stuff to do, and it's always so fast paced, it's relentless. Now, if you speak to someone who works in the NHS at the moment, they're probably going to say something very similar. They might use a different phrase.
Yeah, I feel like
what they're going to try and get across to you is the idea that they have so much work to do, and they're never really eating into that list of things to do. It's just constantly piling on them and piling on them.
There's never a done.
There's never a done. And Amazon, one of the conversations we were having there is, how can you really almost stop and take the time to think about the employee experience and the culture that you're trying to create, and almost try and kind of turn the ship and start moving it in a different direction. So how can you actually change the culture for an organisation like that, given how fast-paced it is and given the nature of the environment in which they're operating? It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, I guess there's all sorts of things that are kind of influencing that, from kind of the outside influences to Amazon, from maybe politics to consumer behaviour, and what the buyers are now looking at is kind of going to impact a company of that size massively.
Absolutely, and fundamentally they're a very high performing business, right? So if they were really struggling, you would maybe think, right, okay, there's some real kind of cultural challenges here which they need to address, and absolutely there are improvements that they can make. But I guess that's what really strikes you with an organisation like that. They're very data driven. They're always looking for that marginal gain. They're always looking for that ability to improve what they're doing and how they do things, even by 0.5 to 1%. But they're always measuring it. They're always getting data to understand where those improvements can be made. And I guess obviously credit to them that they recognise that the people experience, the culture, is something which they want to look at, and they want to make sure that they get even better at delivering a great experience for people, so that yes, they're high performing, but it's kind of sustainable high performance in the sense that the people who work there don't burn out and they actually enjoy the time that they work there.
Thinking to this podcast, Remote Control, so kind of what kind of caused me to want to speak to people like yourself, and kind of other people in the internal comms, and kind of engage employee field. Kind of there's a stat that gets kind of bandied around quite a lot, and it's from the Office for National Statistics. It kind of talks about 50% of the workforce working remotely in 2020. And I think when I first heard that, I thought that's kind of way too many. But then I think about Stream Go where I work, and we've all got that option. I'll be getting the train back this afternoon, won't be going into the office. So yeah, there's different ways that can work. Fundamentally to this podcast, I guess the hard-hitting question is, do you also work remotely?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say, rather than working remotely, I would say I work really flexibly. So I look at how to make my work and my personal life work and work around each other and fit perfectly together. So there's that kind of harmony between the two. And the answer for that to me is to work really flexibly. Yes, sometimes work remotely. I mean, an example of that is 2 days a week, every week I pick my kids up from school, drop them off in the morning. So that obviously takes that kind of shortens the typical working day for me. So sometimes I will just work from home those days to avoid the additional lost time of driving in or making my way into the city centre. Or other times I'll kind of catch up and do some work when they go down to bed at 8 o'clock at night. You know, I tend to work best, particularly kind of sitting down and doing desk work. I tend to do that best when it's kind of later in the evening than first thing in the morning. So it's making sure that the work that I do is all about what I need to deliver for the business rather than the number of hours that I need to do. And this is an age-old kind of conversation about it's not the hours you work or when you work, it should be about the quality of the output. And I guess what we focus on here is making sure that everyone has the trust to deliver, but also that kind of clarity around what it is that we need them to deliver. So people have that kind of clarity of objectives, they've got that understanding of what value they're adding to the business, but they also have that freedom, creative freedom to make it work around all of the other commitments and all of the other things which are really important to people. For me, that is, you know, my family, my partner, and making sure. So, for example, we've just moved into a new house, and the amount of time I've had to be at home to be there for contractors, subcontractors to come do remedial work or just do deliveries, and
they're always on time as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. So a bit of ways. So I've worked from home a lot in the last month. And far more frequently in previous months. Now, compare that to my partner's employer. You know, and it's certainly not a criticism of that employer. It's the nature of her job. She needs to be there. She needs to be there. More typical like 9 to 5 type working hours. So you know, if I didn't have the opportunity to work remotely, it'd be really, really difficult. Because then if you're not able to be around between 9 to 5, how do you get those subcontractors to come out? Because that's the hours that they work. So just that idea of just being able to have flexibility and understand that everyone, that we've got 37 people working here now. Some of them have got children, some of them don't, some of them have got different friends and social groups that all have different working patterns, and to be able to say to them, look, we want to make it work however you want. We've just had a developer working out in Florida. So he was, you know, kind of half a holiday, but half doing some work out there. So he was working out there. We've got one of our other developers over in Thailand with his newborn baby at the moment and his wife, and he's working from out there. So, you know, we can see that statistic that you mentioned. You know, we're embracing it and thinking to ourselves, well, look, we're a business in Newcastle city centre, and this is where we see our future. We're not going to kind of move and relocate. This is where our HQ is. But from a talent pool perspective, we need to really open ourselves up, particularly for the developers, and think, how can we make it so that we can actually attract kind of really talented developers from all over the world? Because if we've got developers who we've recruited here, but they're able to work really well for us from all the different corners of the world, why shouldn't we start recruiting from those corners of the world as well to begin with?
Or limit someone's kind of desire to do that travel and mix up with their work, I guess.
Absolutely. You know, we've got, again, you look at the demographic, the nature of the people we have here. We have someone who wants to go and travel in New Zealand and for a few months and still continue to do a few days a week. So we're going to support him to do that. What a great experience that'll be for him. The challenge is, for me, the challenge with remote working comes from that the sense of isolation and really feeling a part of it. And why I mention that is because the three individuals I've mentioned who have, and including myself, by the way, actually as well in this, we've spent we've started working for Hive, working here, working in the HQ, being around everyone, feeling that buzz, being around the CEO who injects a great energy, and that energy that feeds right through the business. It's very different if you recruit someone who starts their journey working remotely to make sure they feel as part of it. So it's almost like this idea of, well, we're great at having people become part of the Hive family, to use a cliche, and then they move on to start working more remotely. But what we haven't necessarily done yet is recruit someone who from the beginning is based in a completely different location.
Yeah, and I guess, like you say, that comes, I guess, off the back of an opportunity, but brings with it the challenges of being engaged. Like you say, the buzz of working maybe alongside other people is something that some people value and maybe isn't as important to others. And yeah, I guess that's a kind of a whole new different experience for yourselves at Hive, and lots of people now that are embracing the flexible work. You mentioned flexible, it's something that I do as well, and it's great. But yeah, there's some times when it would be good to kind of get my head out of my laptop and see that there's someone kind of just on the next desk and find out what they're doing. And sometimes the instant messaging is great for communication, but it does put up an invisible wall to that usual kind of chit chat that you do have in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in a previous role working in Manchester, and then after 4 years or so relocating back to Newcastle, and working on a remote basis. And I think it's fair to say, in terms of level of engagement or feeling part of it, it changed. My experience of working for that organisation completely changed, and through no fault of theirs. It's different. You're not in it. You're not around people. It became about that one day every 2 weeks where I would go down to the office in Manchester and almost kind of going down to talk through what I'd been working on over the previous 2 weeks. And other than the odd kind of check-in and the odd email, you basically are kind of isolated out on your own with work to do, but no way of kind of really showing what it is you're working on, or that sense of having someone there to bounce ideas off with, get that bit of support. You find yourself just sitting there working all day, whereas obviously you're in an office like this, a few of you will get up and nip out and go and have a coffee or a bit of lunch at lunchtime. All of a sudden I felt very, very isolated, and started to find it a real challenge, and that start then impacts on your well-being, things like that. And obviously from speaking to me, I'm clearly an extrovert as well, so then you throw that into the mix. Are extroverts as suited to working remotely as introverts? I don't know the answer to that, but I can imagine an introvert would probably find it easier to kind of sit away on their own with some kind of work streams that they're focusing on, and kind of plugging away at it. Whereas an extrovert might find it a little bit more difficult. But you touch on things like instant messaging and stuff like that, and obviously, here we are with technology providing such a great opportunity for remote working, and such a great opportunity for that kind of, because this is all about communication, right? So if you're a remote worker, you want that communication, you want to feel a part of it, you want to feel connected to what's happening in the business, you want to feel like you've got a line in to get that support. But the challenges with the communication is nothing is better than face-to-face communication. Like, we're social beings, we need that, and the quality of conversations that you have face-to-face, I think, are always better than ones that you'll have over a chat client or even over the phone as well. So I think the challenge with technology is that we use Slack here, which is great, and we love Slack, but it's very easy for everything to all of a sudden just go through Slack. So again, I think and you'll hear a lot more from people who are experts in comms around what to use the likes of Slack for and what to keep off Slack. But I think for me, I just kind of go off this very basic principle of make sure you get as much face-to-face time in as possible.
Okay, so that's like a conscious decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I take my team here, for example, there's 5 of us now in the people science team. At any given time, we have 2 who are more likely to be based in the office more regularly than the others. But at any given time, all 5 of us could be in different locations. So it's really important to think about and plan ahead and look at when can I get the one-to-one time with them on a regular basis? When can we get time together as a team? When can we all jump on something like Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever to do a face-to-face video call? Just making sure that those people in the team never feel that sense of isolation. You know, they've always got that kind of constant communication, and it's just creating that feeling as well that you're always there. They might not be able to see you, but they know they can pick up the phone to you, because
it's easy to get that kind of bit of feedback or
absolutely
direction.
Absolutely, yeah. So we obviously continue to have that as a conversation here of how do we use kind of communication in the right way, because we've got sales guys who are out on the road, we've got customer success guys who are out on the road, my team are out on the road. It tends to be the developers, the engineering team, that are the only ones that are here the majority of the time. But then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, they're travelling more and they're working more remotely as well. So we're constantly learning and looking at ways to make sure everyone feels a part of it.
I can't stop imagining the developer that you mentioned coding whilst in Disney World. That's where I presume they were in Florida. I imagine they were coding maybe in the Alice Adventure or
Space Mountain Q. Just said,
exactly.
I think those days where he went into Disney World were the ones where he was spending time with his partner out there, and he was making the most of his holiday. I certainly hope so. But he was certainly, we're a small. We're certainly still small enough to be in scale up mode, and we're all kind of hands on deck at times, and it creates such a buzz. But it also, we have this kind of unwavering passion right across the business that we all want to help to move things forward and get things done. I think that particular developer saw an opportunity to still get a few things done in and around some important holiday time that he had in as well. But obviously, it's great for him to be able to use Slack and send us some updates on how his holiday's going as well.
I'm sure you love the photos.
Exactly. But also be able to kind of connect in with his team as well, and still be a part of their kind of sprints and their huddles and things like that to make sure that the team are all together. So it's definitely something we're seeing more here. It's something we're seeing more with our customers, that more and more people are working remotely. And I think you're obviously touching on a really important subject, because it is something that we get asked a lot. How do we get people to want to take part in engagement surveys when they're working remotely? Because what we see from our own data is that response rates from remote workers tends to be slightly lower than from those who are based in the office. As are the employee net promoter scores as well. So something we use as kind of like an engagement metric, an engagement tracker for many of our customers. It seems to be slightly lower for remote workers. So you're basically highlighting that remote workers typically less engaged than non-remote workers, but we're going to be getting more and more remote workers. Here's something we need to solve. Here's a challenge we need to address.
And that's you're dead right. It's exactly kind of where it came from. Is kind of identifying that almost as the employees, thinking of myself as a consumer of working somewhere. That shift is changing in the B2C world. The business has changed to what the consumer is doing, and it's kind of understanding from your insight. I'm really excited where you agree to be on is you're working with companies that will see their employees, massive companies that will see their employees shifting towards either wanting to work remotely or flexibly, and you undoubtedly get insight into kind of what those employees are feeding back to their companies and how those companies are adapting to those demands. So that was kind of the kernel of the idea for the podcast, and definitely why I kind of wanted to speak to you is to understand what type of trends and challenges your clients are seeing, really.
I think if you look at not necessarily just at Hive's customers, but if you look at kind of something like a Glassdoor list of best companies to work for, or if you look at these lists of companies that are offering the best employee experience to their people, you'd see the likes of Airbnb up there. So really, really famous company doing great things. The interesting thing with something like Airbnb is when you look into it is that they started out with and I'm no expert on that particular organisation. This is my own research and interest in this topic. The Airbnb, when they first set out, they had this idea that their people could work from anywhere. So as long as you had, they had the equipment, they had, some goals and objectives and a MacBook or whatever, to be able to get on with their job, then it wouldn't matter whether they were working from a coffee shop in Union Square in San Francisco, whether they were working from the beach in San Diego, wherever, right? But then what they found was that there was this sense of community that was missing, because people didn't have that one location to go to where they would be with other Airbnbs or whatever they call their people. So it's this idea of, my biggest fear is that the more we rely on communication to support remote working, the more we'll lose sight of the fact that, again, I keep coming back to it, that we are social beings that need that face-to-face interaction. Like humans crave it, the human brain craves it, that's never going to change. So we need to figure out ways to support remote working, but without risking or removing that face-to-face conversation, and because when we're all so busy, and we come back to that at the beginning about this idea of hamster on the wheel, right? How easy is it to just think you can just ping a message to someone on a WhatsApp or a Slack or any kind of messenger tool, or even just pinging an email? That's going to feel so much easier to get catching up with John off your to-do list than picking up the phone and having a conversation with him. Or it's going to feel a lot easier to just ping everyone a Google Hangout link than arranging a get-together. But we can't undervalue the importance of the latter. We need to make sure we don't lose that.
That trade-off, isn't it? Potentially between the ease and the tick off the to-do list, like catch up with them, was like, right, I sent that message, that's fine, rather than spending potentially a bit longer, but maybe getting more quality out of that.
Exactly.
Not even really considering the person on the other end of that.
Don't be tempted to go for efficiency over experience. That's the absolute key to this. So it's always going to feel easier and more efficient to use the technology and support remote working and just do it in the quickest or in easiest way. But longer term, we know what the impact of disengagement is. We know what the impact of losing people and labour turnover is going to be. And if the data is there telling us that people are less engaged when they're working remotely, when they're in the office environment, we need to address that. Otherwise, we're just going to have more people kind of leaving those roles, and then obviously organisations are going to be looking to kind of replace those. It's going to be an absolute nightmare from a talent point of view. So I absolutely think we need to look at this and think, well, we need to get the experience right, and what's absolutely key to this is making sure that people feel supported and they feel connected to what's going on inside the business. Another example I can use from our own data, and even using Hive's own insight into our own company culture. We have a recognition tool called High Fives. So I can send, wherever I am, I can jump on my phone and I can send a high five to anyone in the team for demonstrating one of Hive's values, or just generally for doing a great job on something. So we then have a big screen out there in the main office, where you can see almost like a Twitter feed, all of these high fives going through. If I was to take you out there now, I will guarantee that 75% of the high fives on that board will be between, to and from people who are based in the office 4 or 5 days a week. So it'll be the developers, the customer success guys, the marketing team. The likes of my team, and maybe particularly the sales team, are out on the road more often. They won't feature on there as much. Now, that's not to say that they're not doing great work. It's not to say that the work that we're all doing isn't equally appreciated. But it's visibility. It's visibility, and it's just something which I've kind of seen happen organically. And again, you relate this to remote workers. How much easier is it as a manager for you to say great job on that, or well done, or thanks for your support on that, to someone who's there right in front of you in the office? And by the way, we still know that managers need to do a lot more of that, because the recognition side of things is often the overlooked aspect of engagement. But still, it's so much easier for a peer or a manager to thank someone who's there and then, rather than to be able to see all of the hard work and effort, and to just show that appreciation and gratitude to a remote worker. So even things like that are going to be a challenge, that you might feel that you're working remotely and you're putting all of this effort in, but no one's kind of seeing it. No one's really kind of almost appreciating and understanding what you're actually working on, as well as not feeling like you've got that easy kind of line in to just get a bit of support from someone. So I think there are a couple of kind of real key areas there around where the difficulties actually stem from when it comes to working remotely?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of highlighted to me the kind of a really interesting point where, well, to me it feels that this shift towards remote working, I'd maybe not say is new or young, but for it to be so commonplace and so widespread, it does feel quite new. And there's probably a lot of these issues that will kind of cause bigger issues in companies and probably cause different challenges, 6, 9 months down the line, 2 years down the line as things change, and going from a majority of workforce that are based in the office 5 days a week to any variation on that, I guess, will highlight different things, and for the individual, they'll feel differently towards the company.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's that connection, isn't it? It's that emotional connection and almost like the loyalty that you kind of build to a particular brand, a particular organisation that you're working for, that is absolutely crucial to engagement. And again, coming back to this risk with remote working, the last thing you want is for people to keep saying, like, not feeling a part of it, not feeling as big a part of it, not feeling that connection, because you're not getting that buzz, you're not around all of the other people and seeing all of the different areas that make up a business, and or you don't get that sight and appreciation of what all the others are working on. I mentioned perhaps people don't get sight of what you're working on, but it's also difficult for you to see the other parts of it as well. Mm-hmm. And like I say, for me, it's that sense of like that isolation, that buzz. I mean, I crave walking into this office when I've been out. I was in Guildford for the last 2 days. Yeah. And I was with one of my colleagues, and we were blasting out the cause on the drive up, and just singing at the top of our voices, and that's obviously all good times. Yeah.
Questionable, but yeah.
Questionable song choices, but it really helps when you're sitting on the M25 and going through the typical kind of traffic. But to walk in the office after a couple of days out and just see people that you've not seen since kind of mid last week and stuff like that, it's absolutely huge. And I certainly have felt kind of the energy kind of draining out of me sometimes when I've just been sitting working from home, because you're just desperate to hear someone else's perspectives and stories about what's going on in their world at the moment and stuff like that. And that's it.
It's very true.
It's a really interesting challenge, because, like you say, more and more people are going to be working remotely, and it's something that we need to get right. But I was just before recording this, was actually speaking with said colleague that loves singing the cause, and she was telling me that the best working relationship she has from work experience pre-Hive is from a team of remote workers that she was in a hospitality industry. So there's like an HR, like L&D team that were all working and responsible for different hotels around the country. And she said that their relationship and friendships, which they've actually developed from it, all came through how regularly they spoke on the phone and how regularly they made sure they arranged to get together as a team. Yeah. So it just comes back to that. It sounds very simple, but the more you can get your people together, the more you can get your people actually talking and not just using Messenger and email.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
The better.
Kind of what you were talking about, that experience there in terms of the phone, because one of the things that we've touched on briefly, and want to see if you've got any more thoughts on it, is kind of those kind of tools. And in my head, it was software. It was stuff like that would help managers and remote workers, internal comm directors and managers and the employees kind of stay engaged and keep the experience positive. Your colleagues were talking about phone. That's an obvious one, but totally bypassed my kind of preset list of Slack, Zoom or Hangout or anything like that. It's obviously the phone. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything you've seen from either Hive, or previous experience, or some of your clients that kind of you've thought, that's a really good way to keep everyone engaged and everyone on the same page, not just remote or not just people that are in the office. It's like it's just about valuing that time, honestly. It sounds like a really simple answer to it, but if you think about like the one-to-one, like the traditional one-to-one catch-up, how often that gets pushed back or gets rescheduled because of other things that are really busy. As soon as you do that, you're saying to someone
this meeting with such and such, or this issue which has come up is more important than your experience of working here. It's more important than how you're feeling working here. It's more important than your performance. It's more important than your development. It's more important than our relationship as a manager and an employee. As soon as you reschedule that one-to-one, once you've put that into the psychological contract there, that this is not as important as other things.
Yeah.
And then once you do it once, you'll do it
continuously.
Easier, isn't it? It's easy. Once you've done it, that'll be then be the thing that you reschedule. And I can guarantee you, pretty much every business that's listening to this will have someone thinking, I've either had multiple one-to-ones rescheduled, or I've rescheduled my one-to-ones with my team. But then think about how much easier or more likely it is that managers particularly are then not going to have those kind of catch-ups with the remote workers as well.
Someone's not on the other side of the desk looking at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just making sure that, again, you value that time and you really think about what they need and what impact that it's going to have to make them feel like they've got that regular support. And obviously with the remote workers, I feel like you do need to think about how regularly you're able to kind of contact and kind of keep in touch with them. It's not just these messenger tools that, keeping in touch. You can imagine organisations will use kind of time tracking tools as well for remote workers, so that they're able to log what they're working on, what their priorities are, how much time that they're spending on each one. But what we need to make sure is that those remote workers are actually getting those calls of like, how are you getting on? Like, is there anything you need some support with? How are things feeling at the moment? What you enjoying working on? What you perhaps not enjoying working on so much? They need that as much as the people who are there in the office on the day-to-day. And obviously sometimes, it's easy to, if I walk past you and you look visibly frustrated, I can see that and then say to you, Jack, is everything all right? You need a hand with anything? You can't see that when it's a remote worker. And we all know that, or certainly the data is there as well, that shows that people are far more likely to give support if they're asked for it than they are to actually reach out and ask for support. So if you've got people all over the place that are willing to give support to others but are apprehensive about reaching out and asking for support, what's the challenge you've got there? You've got people who are perhaps sat at home working remotely, not feeling so great, feeling like they could do with a chat, feeling like they could do with support, feeling like they need to ask some questions, but perhaps not feeling confident enough on knowing what the right channel is to do it. So a lot of it is about education, but the main bit of this is just valuing that conversation and really understanding the importance.
So it's kind of, it's pushing those tools aside, isn't it? Like you said right at the start, it's kind of pushing that tools, the software aside. It's getting that value and that human kind of craving another human social interaction that kind of would drive that. And then it's like, right, well, okay, well, what's available? How's that person preferred to be engaged with, and how's most? The
tools are the how. That it doesn't matter whether it's Slack or whatever. The tools are the how. Fundamentally, organisations need to ask themselves, why is it so important for us to communicate with one another? Why do we want to communicate? Why is it important for us to have engaged employees? Why is it important for us to deliver a great employee experience and start to build it out from there? The tools and the different channels for communication should be what comes after that. Not just, here's a great channel that's going to make it easier for it to message each other. Let's just procure that and introduce it. Need to start off thinking about what that experience should feel like and asking some of these big questions around the challenges of remote workers, what they need from us. And then once you've answered those questions, you then go out and think, well, right, this tool would work well and it would plug that gap, or it would certainly support that, but we'll also know what's going to be the right way to use this. It's the values and the behaviours that are going to be really important, and then the tools and the way in which we facilitate that should be the second part of it, really. Yeah,
no, that makes total sense, and I guess it's one of those kind of things that you see companies that do well. They always start with the why, and the people that maybe don't do so well are the ones that kind of jump straight into the solution or the tactics or the tools mode. And,
absolutely. But technology is exciting, isn't it? You get a new phone, you get it out of the box, you want to play with all the features. I guarantee you I don't know half the things that phone does because I don't read the instruction booklet.
We can even make phone calls on that one.
Just about. I mean, I'll not say what the service provider is, but I do seem to get cut off every 5 seconds on that one. But It is an interesting one because the technology, it obviously, the way in which it's sold, the way in which it's packaged, it's exciting, it's, everyone's on this kind of digital transformation and they want to use new technologies. But it's just taking that step back and thinking about actually what's really important to our people and how do we protect that, how do we kind of nurture that in the right way, rather than just introducing new technologies and new tools, new mechanisms, and then kind of further down the line evaluating it and thinking, that perhaps hasn't worked so well.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Awesome. Well, coming quite close to the end now, and this one is a real brain scratcher. So it's called Remote Controls. It'd be remiss if I didn't ask you for your TV, streaming, film recommendations at the minute.
Well, that's a really, really good one. A massive Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan.
Oh yeah.
So I was even one of those who was kind of up on Twitter when they announced they were cancelling it after season 5. But then within 24 hours of Fox cancelled it, I think. It was rescued by NBC and picked up. So Brooklyn Nine-Nine, absolutely massive for me. To be honest, my partner Amy, she's one of those that by the time we sit down to watch TV, she'll just look for something kind of funny, and that doesn't require kind of much engagement of the brain. So we'll end up watching kind of Adam Sandler comedies and chick flicks and stuff like that. I must admit, I probably sit there and watch them for longer than she does, enjoy them. But no, from a streaming point of view, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is huge for me. But at the moment, I've kind of got that typical backlog of recommendations. I think Money Heist is the one.
That's mentioned to me.
Mentioned to me a few times. Yeah. So I've got that on the list, but at the moment I'm kind of open to recommendations from you rather than having one that I must recommend. Other than Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I think it's a really, really great program.
Well, my Netflix list gets added to, and then when I go to watch something, it's never from my list. It's always from something else.
From something else.
And it's always half an hour of scrolling, and then you don't have time to watch what you wanted to watch in the first place.
Yeah. I must say that the program which has had the biggest impact on me personally in maybe the last 3 to 5 years plus was the Ricky Gervais Afterlife show on Netflix. Just personal experiences with mental health challenges and things like that. I just found the way in which he approached and kind of challenged and obviously brought humour to that topic as well. I thought it was really, really powerful. Some of the messages in there I thought were really, really great, and it was really well written. So I'm looking forward to the second season of that. But he's obviously got that. He's got that challenge, doesn't he, of making sure that a sequel or a second season can live up to the first which is something I always find quite difficult.
Quite the difference to Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well.
Yeah, it is very well. It just shows that diversity, doesn't it? The hard hitting stuff with the humour in the sitcom.